We're going to move into some conversations now about measuring program effectiveness and how we communicate that clearly. And this is really, I think, a lot of what I was doing leading up to this is trying to, one, make sure that everybody is very clear about the importance of the cradle-to-career continuum and understanding how each blue dot along the way predicts success at the next blue dot. And while there are lots and lots of metrics that we would think matter, these are the metrics that across the nation, generally people are having the same conversations, as Darren said. Kindergarten, third grade reading, some sort of math achievement in the middle years, starting off high school successfully, finishing high school on track, and then persisting. Everybody's kind of having the same conversation. But then we're adding this notion of the social emotional dimensions because we think that if we don't have those conversations, and I think the evidence that I shared with you this morning should convince you, if we aren't talking about these issues that are positive psychology issues, we could undo all the other things, right? So we enroll kids in a tutoring program, the first thing that we remind them is that they need help. I'm not saying that we shouldn't tutor them, but we need to find a way to do it in such a way that they frame it as a choice they're making in an investment in their future, rather than I got stuck here because I'm not good at math, right? But so once we know the kinds of things that we want to measure, the question becomes, how are we going to do that? And how are we going to do it in a way that our funders are going to like to read it and not send us an email with 63 questions on it, right? So we don't think the issue is finding data. I haven't met anyone yet in this century who thinks, gee, I just wish I had more data, right? The challenge instead is finding the right data. And here's how we're defining the right data. It's data that we know organizations commonly collect and review, that's easily understood, and that's actionable. Let me give you an example that's not in the cradle-to-career pipeline. I sprained my toe a couple of weeks ago, which I've learned now that if you're in your 40s, you can sprain anything without even trying. And I'm told it just gets worse instead of better. So I go to the doctor for a sprained toe, and wouldn't you know, they're taking my blood pressure. Now, why in the world would they take my blood pressure for a sprained toe? Because the medical community knows that blood pressure is something that needs to be commonly collected, period. They're not going to take an opportunity to interact with me and not measure my blood pressure. It's commonly collected and reviewed. The doctor comes in with a clipboard, oh, blood pressure's looking okay, and you're here for a sprained toe. Or might say, blood pressure's a little high today. How much time did you spend with your boss this morning before you came in this meeting? Joking. It's commonly collected and reviewed, it's easily understood, and it's actionable. In order to be actionable, improvement has to be within the control of the staff. And the things that we're measuring have to be connected to a future valued outcome, right? So the other thing they measure every time I go to the doctor's office is my height and my weight. One of those is actionable. One of them is not. Right? So I've argued they don't really need to do it. Or I say, okay, shoes on for height, shoes off for weight. I think that's fair. So in your organization, you need to find the right data, and the right data should be commonly collected and reviewed, easily understood, and actionable. And if it's going to be actionable, it's got to be something that you and your staff can move the needle on. I know an awful lot of people who are very well-intending, who are collecting an awful lot of data, and they're either not reviewing it or they're not acting on it. How do I know who these people are? Because when I go to visit them, they sit down and they're like, hey Bill, can you run that one report? What report? Well, you know, the one from the one that's got the colors on it. We did it last year. It's got all the, right? If you can't put your hands on it right away, you're not commonly collecting it and reviewing it, right? It's too long away. But the problem is that sometimes when we have these programs that we're trying to build out our metrics, we have this big dot, right? We're going to help more kids get into college. Kirsten mentioned that earlier. We're going to help more kids start kindergarten ready to learn. The problem is that the big dot is too long-term, or it's only indirectly related to programs. For example, if you're a college readiness program that starts working with kids when they're 14, and your metric is how many of them go to college, we have 4 years before we have any actionable data. At that point, of course, they're out of the pipeline. It doesn't work. So while it's important for us to very clearly define and communicate our final outcome, we need to also very clearly communicate and define our interim progress measures and some real-time data that we're going to be collecting all the time, right? So here are some examples. Let's say we work in a program that focuses on kindergarten readiness. Getting that 19 or higher on the crawl starts with getting them into a program. Are we enrolling kids in program? Are we counting how many kids are in? Are we counting their persistence through the program? Are we measuring parent engagement, their participation in the program, their rates of participation? Are we using pre- and post-test surveys with parents that are validated? This is another issue that I think needs to be considered, and that is a lot of the times people will do a satisfaction survey of parents that they made up on the fly right before the evening, and it said, did you have a nice time tonight? Do you feel more prepared, right? A couple of yes/no questions. We say, well, 80% of the people thought this, or 70. One of the things that I also know we do, though, is we feed the people when they come. We want them to feel welcome and excited about being there, and all that kind of gets mixed up in our survey, right? Of course I feel great. My belly's full, the lights were on, everybody had a good time. But you've created a survey that no one else has ever used. It's your own instrument. And then as a result, when you try to tell a funder that this is a big deal, that the parents felt good, it's hard to validate that. If on the other hand, you're using one of the parent satisfaction surveys that's been recognized by Harvard Graduate School as a great way to measure parent engagement, well, now you can say, we're measuring parent satisfaction engagement using sample X. Preschool enrollment, right? So kind of moving down along that pipeline. Their enrollment relative to other people in the community. The developmental progress, monitoring their skill development over time. And then finally they get into kindergarten. Same thing can happen at the other end of the pipeline, focusing on college readiness. How many kids got into our program and how many kids stayed. Their academic achievement along the way, their quarter GPA. Every quarter, the average GPA or the number of kids who have a GPA above 3 and below 3. Or maybe you can't get that because you can't get your hands on grade point average, which I totally understand. But what you could do is say, hey, how many classes did you fail last quarter? None? All right. 2? 1? You set your goals that way. You still have metrics. You're still focusing on it. You're still counting them. Attendance and participation in the program. Student attitudes. Again, these pre- and post-validated surveys that we've just discussed, the mastery and the aspirations for the future and the college-going identity. Entrance exam scores and early entrance exam scores. Scores from 10th grade, 11th grade, beginning of 12th grade. And then finally they get in, or they complete the FAFSA, so we know they're asking for financial aid, and then their acceptance and application and acceptance rates for college, and then they go. So there are ways to fill the data pipeline so that you can be monitoring progress towards your ultimate goal of getting kids ready for kindergarten or getting kids ready for college or whatever it is in a way that tells a story other than you'll have to trust us. 3 years from now, we'll tell you whether or not this worked.